Canadian Women's Foundation and manage all our economic development work. As I said before, you might have heard me, we have English and French interpretation available, so feel free to switch to the language that you prefer. You are also able to ask questions in the language that you prefer, English or French. So the purpose of this webinar is intended to provide you with more information about the Foundation's economic development grants and help you write your proposal. I'm seeing people introduce themselves in the chat, which is great. Lovely to have you. Some housekeeping. I will try not to speak too quickly. If I do, please let us know in the chat or type it in the question box and I will slow down. We will be keeping all the questions for the end of the presentation, but you can type any of your questions in the question box at any time. We recommend you to use the question box and not the chat because the questions may be lost in the chat. So note that this webinar is being recorded and the contents of the presentation will be made available to you on our YouTube channel within 2 days. So I'd like to start this webinar acknowledging that many of us are located on traditional and ancestral and unceded territories of many Indigenous communities. We want to recognize that the role of First Nations, Métis, Inuit, and Inuit peoples have played and continue to play as guardians of lands and waters. It is with great respect that this role that we start our work, knowing that our relations need to be improved and taking into account the continued impacts of colonization, systemic racism, and the ongoing violence towards Indigenous communities across Canada. So the Canadian Women's Foundation is a national public foundation for women, girls, trans, and non-binary peoples across Canada. We've been providing multi-year funding for women's economic development programs since 1997. And we select and evaluate these programs we fund based on the Sustainable Livelihoods Framework, which is a framework for understanding and talking about what your programs are doing and serves as a tool to explore the 4 contextual dimensions of poverty. I do want to mention that we are not an anti-poverty organization. 5 stages of the Sustainable Livelihood Frameworks are listed here. Stage 1, survival. Women, trans, and non-binary peoples are unemployed or underemployed, which means their assets are declining. Stage 2, enhancing employability. Women, trans, non-binary people increase their ability to meet basic needs, which allows for greater focus on employment readiness and decision-making. Their assets are stabilizing. Stage 3, exploring possibilities. Women, trans, and non-binary people enter the workforce and use income patching strategies like multiple part-time jobs. This helps build on assets in various areas. Stage 4, considering opportunities. Women, trans, and non-binary peoples strengthen and professionalize their employment patterns. Their ability to develop new assets accelerates. And finally, stage 5, the sustainable livelihood. Women, trans, and non-binary people achieve long-term financial security. You can find more information about the sustainable livelihoods on our website. We also do have, I apologize. My computer is, there we go. You can find more information about the Sustainable Livelihoods Framework on our website, and we do have a webinar which outlines the Sustainable Livelihoods Framework in much more detail on our YouTube channel. So we use this framework to support our grant making, but it's not meant to impose a structure on your work, but gives us and all the programs that we fund a common language to talk about the work that we do. When we look at your projects, we'll be looking to fund those in the first stages of the economic development of the Sustainable Livelihoods Framework. So 1, 2, and 3 right here. We highly recommend that anyone applying for an economic development grant to review the framework so that you have a clear understanding of what this framework is about and how it relates to your application. I'm just going to pause right here because I noticed there's been a number of new people joining us. So welcome to the webinar. We are just starting by sharing a little bit of our outlook of economic development at the foundation. Feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. There is simultaneous interpretation in English and French. So feel free to listen in the language of your choosing that you feel most comfortable in, as well as feel free to use a Q&A box to ask any questions. We recommend using the Q&A box and not the chat so your questions do not get lost. Absolutely. The language is it's a bilingual webinar, so we'll have slides in English and French, but you will be able to access the slides in the language of your choosing post-webinar. I will move on. I do also just want to mention staff members who are able to help you answer any questions about access to tech or any other questions. We have LIVELIHOODS, Karen Campbell, and Melissa here to answer any questions that you have in accessing any of the presentations today. Okay. So for the economic development grants, this call for proposals involves a two-stage process. Interested organizations are invited to submit a letter of intent using our online portal. You will only be able to submit one application per organization. This webinar will primarily address the letter of intent and the guidelines and criteria. So you'll be submitting a letter of intent to us in our portal. There'll be a space for you to add the letter of intent there. We ask that you don't email us your letters of intent because there are organizational questions that you need to respond to in the application portal. To be deemed eligible for an economic development grant, you must demonstrate charitable status or a qualified donee status. Applicants must be an incorporated non-for-profit organization, have a valid charitable number from the CRA, Canada Revenue Agency, or be a First Nations band or municipality designated as a qualified donee by the Canada Revenue Agency. If your organization does not have charitable status or is not a qualified donee, we can still consider your application in partnership with another organization that is a registered charity or qualified donee with a mandate relevant to your proposal. The other organization's board of directors will have fiscal responsibility for the grant and will be legally responsible for ensuring the funds are spent for the charitable purposes intended. So once you've submitted your letter of intent and the application closes, we will invite a select number of organizations to submit a full proposal, detailed work plan, budget, and partner letters. You will note that we are not asking for that at this stage. All the applicants will be notified within 4 to 6 weeks after April 14th about whether they pass the second stage. We will be awarding approximately 10 grants of up to $65,000 a year for 4 years, from 2023 to 2027. Again, I invite you to ask any questions in the chat, in the Q&A box. So the economic development grants will support organizations offering programs for women, two-spirit, trans, and non-binary people in the 4 areas: self-employment business acceleration, trades and technology, workplace navigation and inclusion, and network grants. I will go into explaining what those are in the next few slides. So we're looking to fund organizations who are providing self-employment and business acceleration programming. These are programs providing comprehensive self-employment training and accelerator programs that support participants to explore entrepreneurship as a career option, to create business plans and launch new businesses. We're looking at programs that are geared to business growth, acceleration, provide one-on-one coaching, financial management training, access to loan funds, and customized marketing and sales training as examples. We're really looking at organizations who provide a strong self-assessment and business readiness component that provide opportunities to build networks within their participants, clear developed curriculums, and adapt to modify to respond participant and training needs, as well as provide wraparound supports. We're also looking to fund trades and technology programs that support participants to explore and participate in trades and technology in the trades and technology field, including the trade and technology readiness programs leading to job placements in the skilled trades or technology sector, apprenticeships, or further training, We'll consider funding pre-apprenticeship and trades and technology, bridging programs, and employment and retention supports. Looking at organizations that include a comprehensive recruitment and assessment phase that supports their participants, can show evidence that there are job opportunities within the sectors that they've outlined, and can demonstrate support from the selected sectors that they're planning to work in. We're also looking to fund workplace navigation and inclusion programs. Please note, Please note that we are looking to fund programs that this is the only stream where we're looking to fund charitable organizations operating a social enterprise. So we're looking to fund programs that support participants to develop transferable skills that will enhance their capacity to enter the workforce. And programs that offer job seeking and workplace navigation supports. Like I said, this is the only stream in which we're considered charitable organizations running a social enterprise that provide on-the-job training and workplace navigation supports. We're looking at organizations who are running established social enterprises. Please note that this stream is looking to support organizations that are primarily working with Black and Indigenous populations as well as people with disabilities. We're looking at organizations who are supporting their participants to gain transferable skills, recognize the importance of self-advocacy, core skills such as resume building, networking within their communities, provide those providing employment, provide development strategies that create long-term and accommodating employment, as well as offer a flexible work employment environment, including wraparound supports. If you feel I'm going through this quite quickly, please note that all of this information is on our website in the grant guidelines document, as well as in the application portal. So you'll be able to access all this information in the comfort of your own time. Lastly, we will be funding network grants. We will be considering funding organizations that provide sectoral research sharing, capacity building, or training opportunities, and knowledge mobilization regionally, provincially, and nationally. We're also looking at, in particular, groups working on decent work. We will consider funding organizations that work directly in these pillars of decent work: rights at work, social protection, and the exchange of information on economic issues. So we are looking at organizations working on systems change, who have experience doing policy and leadership work on economic security and justice, who actively work with their participants and address systemic barriers to full economic participation. We're really looking at organizations working on the intersections of economic security and justice and gender justice. So now that I've explained a little bit about what we are looking to fund, what do we not fund? So we do not fund individuals, federal, provincial, municipal government agencies, fundraising events, any projects outside of Canada, projects that are primarily not for women, girls, non-binary, trans, and two-spirit peoples, deficit or emergency funding, conferences, capital campaigns, and self-defense training. And you can find out what we don't fund on our website as well for more information. And I see the questions coming in, so that's great. So to be considered for an economic development grant, your program, project, or initiative is required to meet the following. It must apply a feminist and intersectional lens. It must understand the intersections between the intersections and barriers to economic opportunity, including race, class, gender, sexual identity, disability, immigration status, and language or geographic location. It must use an asset-based and a positive approach, really centers the client's knowledge and lived experience. You must be an organization that's primarily working with women or gender diverse people with significant experience working and providing economic opportunities for your participants, as well as organizations who are providing a continuum of services and connection to the community. You must also consider the realities of your participants' lives, looking at providing wraparound supports and other supports that your participants need. We're looking at organizations who have established partnerships with other organizations or communities that they serve, and organizations that are clearly communicating how the funds will be able to be used to enhance the capacity to serve their participants. We're looking at organizations who demonstrate approaches to create and maintain braver and safer spaces, encourage participants to speak up, and consider the safety of participants in their program and outside of the program. I'd like to note at this stage, we are not asking for any attached documents. We will just be asking you to fill out the letter of intent application on our website. The selection committee is interested in knowing the needs of your community and why your organization is well suited to these needs. We're also interested in getting a better understanding of your program goals and about your experience and approach in delivering intersectional gender-based programming. You can provide a short summary of your organization's mission, the leadership expertise, and particularly as it relates to be able to understand and or reflect the needs of communities served by your organization. If you are working with partners, you may also include in your letter of intent how you'll work to advocate and work with your partner to advocate and support the proposed change. Feel free to include any information about your past programming. Pretty important part of the presentation is timeline. So as you may know, the application to the letter of intent opened last week on March 7th. We have until April 14th, 11:59 PST, for those in the East, that is PST, not EST, to submit your application. We will be inviting folks to submit an application to work on their application the week of June 6th, and shortlisting and the committee meetings will happen in August to September of 2022. We will conduct site visits on October 22, and applicants will be notified of the decisions in November 2022, and funding will be awarded in January 2023. Please note once again, the funding is from 2023 to 2027, a total of 4 years. So before you start your application, we've, as a team, created a series of documents for you to fill out, for you to use, my apologies. Grant guidelines, application instructions, and frequently asked questions. In the grant guidelines, you will find information on criteria, eligibility, and timelines. In the application instructions, you will find detailed instructions on how to fill out the answers. I apologize, it seems that we did not copy the English in this presentation, but for folks who will be needing the English presentation, we'll make sure to have that part translated for you. And we do have a frequently asked document, which may have some of the answers that you're looking for, or answers that I may have not addressed at this webinar or at this time. Feel free to access any of those documents. They are on our website, and there will be also within the application portal. Once again, you'll be submitting a letter of intent as within our portal, so there'll be space for you to add your letter of intent in there. Please do not email your letter of intent to us. It's great for you to email us, but there are some organizational questions that I will show in this webinar that you'll have to answer to complete your application. To access your application, you go onto our website and you'll see this lovely blue box right here. And where it's marked here red, this is the link to register for your application. You would click on this link, and before we go to what page you'll see, I would like to note that if you've never applied for a Canadian Women's Foundation grant before, we would ask you to click on New Applicant, and it'll bring you to this page right here and add all your information. Once you have done that, you will come back to this login page right here, and you'll be able to access the application. If you have applied for a Canadian Women's Foundation grant before, you'll probably know this page right here and be able to access your economic development grant application. So once you've logged into the system, you'll be brought to the eligibility form, and this will remind you of all the activities that we do not fund and also ask you to fill in the eligibility quiz right here. Now, before we get into the application, I want to take you back to the website. And in here, you'll see on this blue box another link. Now, this is the link to sign in and to register are different. So once you've registered your application and your account, to sign into the application, let's say you looked at the eligibility quiz, looked at the questions, and you want to come back another day to fill in the application. You would come back and click on the second link here, and this will take you right back to that login page. You do not need to register your application again. So once you're in the portal and you've looked at it, you will be brought to this home page right here. And in it, you can see your application, whether you've done it in English or French right there, and you'll be able to access your application this way until April 14th at 11:59 PST. Once you've opened your application, you will note a few tabs at the top of the page. You can click on any tab you'd like to jump to the part of the proposal where you'd like to work on. The first tab includes questions primarily related to you and your partner organization. My apologies, I'm having some issues with some notes here. The second tab includes questions related to the proposed activities, and this is where you'd submit your letter of intent. The final tab allows you to review and submit your application. Read the proposal question instructions right there, as you can see, and the guidelines of the applications, as well as the FAQs. All these documents are on the website, but also linked here for ease for you to be able to access them. It's also in English and French. Most fields are mandatory, please note that. You can also print or email yourself a draft of your application at any point. We recommend that you fill in your application in a Word document, or you send it to yourself or a colleague for them to look at. You're able to save and finish your application at any time before April 14th. And there's a save and finish later bottom at every single page. So you'll be able to add your organizational information here. And as noted, there's your documents that you'll need to answer the questions. You will be able to include your organization's CEO and ED information. You will also be asked to see if you have a charitable number, and if not, if your organizational partner has a charitable number. And if so, you'll be asked to input your organizational partner's name and information and mandate, as well as their mission. Once you're done with the organizational information, you will be brought to tab 2, where you can indicate for the grant stream that you're applying for. And just a reminder, those are self-employment and business acceleration, workplace navigation and inclusion, trades and technology, and network grants. You will add your project name, the communities you're working with, and your primary geographic area. Once you've completed that, you would be asked the number of individuals receiving service, You'll be able to add in where you identify your program sits in the Sustainable Livelihoods framework. And if you are applying as a charitable organization running a social enterprise, we're very much interested in a little bit more about the business that you are running. So you may be able to include that. And as a reminder, that is only for organizations applying in the workplace inclusion and navigation stream. You will then be asked to fill in your letter of intent. We highly, highly recommend that you click on the proposal instruction questions right there, because you'll have a detailed breakdown of exactly what the selection committee is interested in hearing from you and your organization. You have upwards to 700 words in the English application and 850 words in the French application. Again, I invite you to ask any questions you have in the question and answer box. So, some application guidance for you as you are getting ready to write your application. We ask that you answer your question clearly, intentionally, and completely. Our selection committee is made up of committee members from across the country, experts, donors, and grantees. So they may know your program or they may not. So please answer your questions as clearly as possible. Reread and read your application. You can send a draft to yourself at any time, and you can make sure to share it with your colleagues. So make sure that you've answered all the questions or typos and any sort of those types of things. Know your audience. So while you may have been funded or otherwise be known to the foundation, please do not assume that we know your work. As I said before, our committee is made up of experts, community members, donors from all across the country, and they will be reviewing applications. So they may not be as familiar with your work as we are. So please be explicit in sharing your organization's approach, your organization's connection to the community, and your experience in delivering intersectional gender-based programming, why you need the funding, and noting why this work is important to your organization and your community. We also say maybe to refrain from sharing research or statistics from external sources and speak more broadly to the issues and really focus more on your community and then why your funds are needed. Showcase your community. We want to know who you are, who's in your organization, who you're serving, and how they show up in your organization. We'd love to hear how you actively integrate and connect with participants in order to connect with the lived realities of your participants' lives. Lastly, please show us how your proposed work is founded on a history of success in addressing gender justice. So the committee is interested in really know more about your experience in developing and running programs that have that intersectional lens. And the last thing is connect with us. Connect with me and other members of our team. The best way to reach us is via email. It's probably the fastest way at this time. So feel free to send us an email. We'll be sharing my contact information at the bottom. If you have any questions or you have any concerns, feel free to send us an email and we'll be available to answer questions for you in these next few weeks. Lastly, before we go into the question and answer period, I do want to say that our economic development grants are made possible by all these generous donors here listed and many other corporate partners and individuals and private and family foundations across the country. And I thank them for their generous support. And how do you contact me? So both my emails are here. So is my extension, and we'll put that in the chat and it's available to you on the website. Again, just to let you all know, feel free to give me a call, but probably the fastest way at this time is to send me an email and I will try to respond to you as quick as possible. And if you do have any questions around our accessing the grants portal, feel free to also contact our grants administrator, Phaedra, and her email is listed right here as well as her extension. So thank you very much for staying with us. And now we will move into the question and answer period. So I will just open the Q&A and see what questions are coming through. Feel free to send them our way.
Michelle, can I interject with a question or two? Because the tech team has been answering questions as we go, but there were a few that came up that maybe you could expand on that I could throw to you if that would work.
That's amazing. Thank you.
Okay, so we have a question about the regional and national spread of the projects that will be funded. Can you talk a little bit about how those decisions are made and what the reach is?
Absolutely. So organizations from across the country are invited to apply, and we have committee members from across the country are reading our applications, so they're able to provide us the context of your, hopefully a little bit of context from your communities, and we break down using population to figure out how many grants that we can award in each region. So yeah, we're accepting applications from all across the region, and we fund all across the country. And I see here a question in the chat: is there a successful past recipients or projects funded through previous rounds? Absolutely, that is on our website. I invite one of our team members, if they can please put that in the chat, a list of the currently funded or economic development programs right now.
For sure, I can do that after I ask this next question. So can you say something about large multi-service organizations that aren't exclusively focused on women in their programming, but might have women-specific programs and how they would be considered in the mix?
Absolutely. You are still eligible if you're a community center or an organization that does not primarily serve women, girls, trans, and two-spirit and non-binary peoples. You're still eligible to apply. However, we do ask that your program specifically supports those communities. But your program does not, your organization itself does not have to be a women-centered organization or a gender justice-centered organization.
That's great. And there's another question here about whether or not you can apply in multiple open calls for proposals for the foundation at once.
Yes, you can. So there is a community needs grant that is closing, I believe, on Monday, March 21st. So if you have applied to that, you're still eligible to apply to the economic development grants. I would just like to note that the community needs grants are an annual grant, and the economic development grants are a multi-year grant, so we will not be open again until 2027.
Great. And another question that we haven't been able to address at all in the chat just yet about the network grants and expanding on those. Is there, will the committee consider proposals from groups that are just starting to come together into a network and then would be developing their programming throughout the 4 years, or are you looking for established partnerships, established networks that would be ready to go?
No, absolutely. The committee is open to reviewing organizations that are just starting a partnership or really looking to, start this type of research or advocacy project. We are definitely open to accepting applications like that. Yes, yeah, absolutely.
That's great. And I guess another important question is about the size of organizations that are applying for grants. Is there any sort of cap on the operating budget of an organization, or what kind of consideration is given to size?
Absolutely. There is no cap to how big the organization is. I know that in the community needs grants, they're primarily funding organizations that are grassroots and have an operating budget less than $1 million. The economic development grants does not have that restriction. However, we have listed our priority populations in the grant call, so feel free to look at those communities. And also note that in the workplace inclusion and navigation stream, we are looking at organizations that are primarily serving Black, Indigenous, and people with disabilities.
Great. And just as a bit of a recap for folks, can you just talk a little bit about the letter of intent and just really briefly, high level, what kind of information you'd really like them to prioritize?
Absolutely. So the letter of intent is within our portal. The selection committee is really interested in gaining a better understanding of the program you're looking to propose. Who are your community members? Who's in your organization? What is your experience in delivering intersectional gender-based programming as it intersects with economic justice / economic security? What are your priorities? What are you looking to do within your community? What other funds what are you looking to use the funds for? So that's what they're primarily interested in, really hearing from you and your community about what the need is, and your experience in delivering programming to participants in your community. And we're also really interested in how you engage your participants, how active or integrated are they within your programming. That is something that is really important, as listed in the selection criteria that you can look at, that participants integrated in the programming is an integral part of the committee's decision-making process.
Great. And we have a specific question from an organization that works with newcomers. And their question is that they have a job readiness services component of their work, but they want to expand more to enhance employability and empower the participants in their programs. Is that something that we would be considering?
Yeah, absolutely. It sounds like it fits the workplace navigation and inclusion stream. It's hard for me to say yes completely to just the one description, but feel free to send me an email with a little bit more information and I can provide a little bit more guidance. But from what you just wrote, it seems like it does fit the grant guidelines.
And another question, and I think this comes up a lot for funders, because there's a lot of funding organizations that really have a strong focus on funding new work, new initiatives. Is that the case for this grant stream, or would you be open to funding existing work?
We're absolutely open to funding existing work. I know that there's a lot of conversation about innovation and new. Sometimes some things just work and are essential for community members. So we are absolutely open to funding current programming that is happening.
That's great. And actually, I think the exact same question just popped into the chat here. Can we apply for grants for running recurring programs that we've already started? And I think you've answered that. Yes, absolutely. I wonder if you can talk a little bit about the committee, because sometimes I think at the foundation, we run these committee processes, but a lot of folks don't really know, what that looks like, or, who the committee is, how we connect with those folks. Maybe you can provide a little bit of info about that.
Of course. So our committee members are made up of our stakeholders that we engage with, and those are grantee organizations like yourselves. They are community experts. So we do have some folks who understand how social enterprises work and how social innovation works, because we are funding social enterprises. We have folks who work with our priority communities, which are Black, First Nations, Inuit, Métis communities, as well as women with disabilities. So we have folks who come from those communities who can provide insight there. And then we have donors as well sitting on our committee because they're also implicated in the way that we fund. So it's a group of amazing people from all across the country as well, reflecting the diversity and amazingness of our stakeholder community, language, experience, race, class, ability, everything that we list in our grant, we try and have that reflected in our committee members. And then they're able to read your applications and really provide insight and make decisions on who gets funded. So they're ultimately the deciders of the funding, and we're here to support them in that decision-making process.
Thanks, Michelle. I think that's something that as managers of grant streams that we've often reminded folks who are applying, it's that as staff, we're not the ultimate deciders, on the grant streams. It's really up to the committee to decide. There's a question about whether or not the list of committee members is public. Do you want to
Yeah,
respond to that?
It is on our website. I believe you would go to, oh, it's been a while. I'm gonna just stop share so I can see if I can find it on our website. Might be in our About Us section. There would be a section on all our committee members for all our grants. So you'd be able to find that information.
That's great. I'm not seeing any more. Oh, there's another one just popped in. Is this grant for existing programs or new programs? Yeah, again, it's for both existing and for new programs. So feel free to apply either way. Let's see who else is coming in.
I see your question. Our cost is just for one salary person. Would this be okay? Ooh, that's a hard question to answer without any more information. So I would say yes, we do cover salaries at the foundation in your grant. So because we understand it's important to have people there to do the work. But I would ask if you expand a little bit more, maybe via email or another form of communication, so I'm able to provide you more guidance.
Something that often comes up as a question is about participant numbers. And if we have any sort of, if the committee has any sort of consideration or worries about programs that have very small reach, maybe 5 or 6 participants versus programs that are going to be reaching 100 or more participants.
Yeah, I mean, I would say that the committee would be looking at your grant call, like the amount that you've requested versus your programming. So it's not necessarily about reaching 100 people, and it's more about the type of programming that you're doing and the impact that it's having on committee members. So looking at the funds that you've asked for and how that relates to the work that you're planning on doing, really that's where the emphasis is.
That's great. And I noticed that a question just came into the chat box about collaborations with other organizations to apply.
Absolutely, you are. You're able to collaborate with another organization. I would say if you are doing a partnership and you are filling out the application and you both have charitable numbers, please fill out the organizational partner information as well. Even though we know that it's your charitable number that will be listed in the application, but just so that we know that it's a partnership between 2 organizations. I see a question here. Is the grant only for 10 organizations for $65,000? It's for 10 organizations at $65,000 per year for 4 years. Gonna drink some water here.
And another question about the timelines and the start date of a program. So could an organization apply for funding for a program if they're currently running it, and the start date for their next round or their next cohort would maybe be a little bit into when the funding cycle begins for us? Could they start their programming a little bit later?
Yes, we would need to explore, or maybe you need to sort of explain in your application why your program would be starting in 2024 rather than 2023. And depending on your explanation, that may be adequate for our committee members to make a decision. Yeah, that would be sort of my simple answer to that.
Great. And with the letter of intent, does there need to be a letter of support also submitted?
No. So for this round, we were not asking you for any attached documents. We were just asking you to fill out the application portal and the letter of and input your letter of intent in that text box. In the second round, we would be asking for letters of support, budget, template, and other attached documents that will be shared with you once you move to the second stage.
Great. And what about other funding sources? Do organizations have to demonstrate that they have other funders on board? How does the committee respond to that?
you don't have to demonstrate that you have other funding sources. However, it does affect the committee's decision. So I would say to keep in mind, if you have lots of funding, that might affect the committee's decision for your program. So that's just something else to keep in mind. But if you don't have another funding source, that's okay. We still invite you to apply for the application. If you do have other funding sources, still apply, but just recognize that it might impact the committee's decision.
Yeah, I would just add to that as well, that on the budget form, it will ask you to list any unconfirmed or confirmed extra sources of funding when you get to that stage after the LOI. So if you are proposing to do a program that is far beyond the $65,000 per year grant, and you aren't showing us that you have other sources of funding to be able to make up the rest of that funding portion, then the committee will wonder about that. So we'll need to see some kind of explanation about how the program would be sustained. A question from Jackie: could some of the funds be used for the purchase of a license attached to an existing national program?
Not sure what you mean by the purchase of a license attached to an existing national program. Jackie, feel free to send me an email so we can chat about this offline. I think I may be able to give you a better answer now. Thanks, Jackie. Looking forward to that email. We have 10 more minutes, so feel free to ask any more questions at this time right now. Anything at all. I also just want to thank our interpreter, Miriam, for bearing with me. I know I was speaking a little quickly right there, so we do have another webinar tomorrow if you've been listening in French and feel like you may have not caught everything. So feel free to attend that, and we will post it on our on our YouTube channel. I'm not seeing any more questions. We'll do one last call for questions, anything at all. You may have or are burning to ask. Vous pouvez poser votre question en français aussi if you have any questions in French. Okay, it looks like maybe there aren't any more questions. Thank you so much for joining us today. Oh, if I've missed it, can you please reinstate your email? Absolutely, I would just put my email here in the chat. I see someone has raised their hand. Was that for a question? No, okay. Well, thank you all so much for joining us today. If you have any further questions, feel free to send me an email, and we'll be able to chat offline about your proposal. Wish you all a wonderful evening. I thank my team, Karen, Leva, Melissa, and Phaedra for being here with me, as well as thank you, Miriam, for interpreting as always. Wish you a lovely afternoon, and stay tuned for an email that will be coming with the link to the presentation as well as the recording. Thank you all. Goodbye.